Hi, I'm Joe Rizzoli. Welcome to Framingham Historical Video Memories.
My name is Steve Herring. I'm with the Framingham Historical Commission. Today is Sunday, August 21st, 1994. It is the last few days in the life of the original Shoppers World, and we thought it might be a good opportunity to take one last look. We're standing now on the south side of the mall property, between the mall itself and Route 9. And before looking in more detail at the mall itself, I thought I'd draw your attention to the great sign of Shoppers World over my shoulder here that is very much a part of this original complex. It wasn't here at the very first years that the mall was built. The mall was opened in October of 1951, and probably sometime during the 50s this great sign, maybe 60, 70 feet tall, was erected. There are many signs along Route 9 now, many neon plastic signs, because it is very much a commercial strip, known as the Golden Mile originally. But the Shoppers World sign stands out as the granddaddy of the mall. It's by size and overall imposition on the landscape. It's really the nucleus of the Route 9 signage that we see today. One point about that sign that I'd like to just make, when it was first put up, there was a major element there that is not seen today. At the very top of the sign, there was an elliptical colored map of the world that could be seen from both sides, and that was lighted from within. So at night you would see this blue and green and red map of the world that really topped the sign and gave the strong feeling of it being a world unto itself, being Shoppers World. Probably the high winds, perhaps the hurricanes of the 60s, 50s or 60s brought about the demise of that part of the sign, but I just wanted to point out that the sign that you see today, which is not long for this world, is not the complete original sign. So now if we can look over to the mall itself, and the major feature of the mall that you can see from the south angle, which is of course the premier view and perspective of the mall, is the Great Jordan Marsh Dome. The dome is 54 feet high, 227 feet across. It's estimated to weigh about 170 tons. It's the anchor, almost literally the anchor, the original anchor of all shopping malls, and it anchors the south end of Shoppers World. It's a primary part of the original design. The architect was Morris Ketchum of Ketchum, Gina and Sharp, a New York architecture firm. It was done at the behest of the developer, Boston developer by the name of Houston Rawls. The dome at first had a little more. You see a lot of brick at the ground level. There was more glass originally to show off and showcase the merchandise within, but over the years it has been more closed in. The cooling apparatus on the left is original. That was here when it was opened in 1951. What is not original is the area to the left of the cooling apparatus where it says Jordan Marsh. That's all an addition from the early 60s, and we'll get a better look at that later on. We're now on the west side of the old Shoppers World, slated for demolition just within a few days, part of our last look at the old mall. Before I continue describing the mall itself, you may notice in the background as we're doing the shootings quite a lot of traffic today, and that's because of the clearance sales going on at the stores as they're closing up for their last days before they move on to other malls or other sites. The parking lot here, when it was first opened, was 50 acres. It offered space for 6,000 cars, and that was one of the main attractive features of bringing people from the city and other suburbs here to Framingham in the 1950s, where they didn't have to pay for parking. There were no parking meters, plenty of parking. They didn't have to worry about the security of their car. That, of course, was one of the main factors in the transition in America from the downtown commercial districts to the suburban shopping malls, of which, of course, Shoppers World in Framingham is one of the first. Now, the structure behind me and to my left, where you see the brick face and doors for Jordan Marsh, that was not part of the original structure. As a matter of fact, from that area down to my right, where there is now a loading area for Jordan Marsh, that was all an open area. And in fact, it was one of two open landscaped entrances to the mall itself that were here back in 1951. What you would do is just, if you didn't want to go through a store, you would just enter straight on down to where those trees are, which is a grassy slope with park benches and other trees, and then you would be right down into the mall. That space was just too precious to use in that way, so in the early 60s, Jordan Marsh built up this extension to their store and filled in that space. I'd also point out the white building where it says HMO Blue, Framingham Medical Association now. That for many years, going back to 1951, was what might be considered a semi-anchor. It was Kennedy's store, men's clothing. I'm going to cut now. Okay. Now, to the left of this white wall that was the original open entrance to the mall, you'll see a white building that has the banner HMO Blue, Framingham Medical Association. For at least 30 years, dating back to the very opening of Shoppers World, this was one of the major stores. It was Kennedy's men's store, and as you can see, it's higher than most of the other stores, and so in effect it was almost a anchor unto itself. And because of its exposure to the outside and to Route 9, it was part of the landmark aspects of Shoppers World. Then as we go further north, you'll see the low profile of the stores that surround either side of the mall. You'll see a sign pointing to Lower Mall and a store with the name Casual Corner. This is one of 6 ramp entryways, which became the only ways to enter the mall space directly without going through a store. The interesting thing about these ramps is that you had to go either up or down. There was no straight entrance at the level of the parking lot. And so in effect you were making a transition one way or the other, enhancing the feeling of going into a different world or different space. And we'll be getting in there and looking around a little later. Going further south, that low profile of the mall stores continues. It looks like a one-story building, but because the lower level of the mall is below grade, it's actually a 2-story. And then you will see this very tall structure that breaks up the low profile, and that is the chimney for the incinerator that they have here and was here ever since the beginning. One thing about that chimney that's interesting, it presents plenty of blank space that the retailers knew could be used in some way, and so the store that happened to be right at the base of that chimney for many years was a Sears store. And so during the first approximately 15 years that this mall was in existence, large letters SEARS, vertically placed from top to bottom, could be seen on that chimney. Sort of a little extra opportunity for the Sears store to bring attention to itself. But the chimney remains, but it's just interesting to note that it too was used to advertise the retail nature of this facility. And now we'll continue the outer inspection of the mall by going north of that chimney. We're continuing our last look at the old original Shoppers World. We're on the west side, moving north. Behind me, to my right, is the central ramp entrance on the west side. You may note as you're seeing this exterior view that as far as architectural design is concerned, the emphasis in this 1951 Shoppers World design was not on the exterior. These are very functional pieces of the building that you're seeing for shipping and receiving and for disposal of waste. Probably some more landscaping to mask some of that would have been helpful, but it's something we've all gotten used to. Anybody coming here, of course, really doesn't care about the exterior appearance. They're anxious to get in and enjoy the mall, the landscaping, the flowers, and the amenities of the mall itself. Continuing our scan of the exterior, however, on this west side, we see the northwest entrance. They've hung a banner there saying General Cinema because that now is the access through the mall to the cinemas on the other side. It is on the east side where construction is already beginning on the new Shoppers World. So that is one of the reasons why the traffic and the parking is so congested on this side. Now, just north of that entrance, you'll see a large brick expanse and the sign Toys R Us. Just point out that that is a later appendage to Shoppers World, and it was not originally a Toys R Us store. Perhaps back in the early 60s, a supermarket was put in there, and the walls were much more glass and aluminum than brick. From the very earliest days, there was a supermarket at Shoppers World. At the very beginning, it was a Brockelman's, and it was in the stores along the side of the mall. A few years after that, it changed to a Stop and Shop. And then when Stop and Shop wanted to expand in the early 60s, they built this extension to the mall at this northwest corner. And they were there for several years. I remember going there, and but it may have been at least 10 years now that Toys R Us has taken over that spot. In effect, being a major warehouse type of store, when Toys R Us came here, that might be considered the beginning of the end, because the kind of store that will be here when the new Shoppers World is built will be of that variety, more of the warehouse type stores. Toys R Us will be one of them, and that will signal an important change in the retail structure of this property. Many of the smaller stores will be going to Natick Mall, the rival to this mall that came along in 1965. Now, beyond Toys R Us is another building, the north anchor of the store, and we'll be looking at that next. We're now on the north side of the Shoppers World Mall. You see the north face of the Toys R Us store, and you see some of those light-colored panels indicate where the large plate glass windows of the old Stop and Shop supermarket were located. So that's sort of a remnant of that era when Shoppers World was the home of a large-scale grocery store. And as I said before, that building was a later extension. Another later extension to Shoppers World is the building to my right, which is now labeled Jordan Marsh Home Clearance Center. That was first known as the Jordan Marsh Basement Store, and for many years it was built in the early 1960s and completed the original design of Shoppers World, which called for an anchor store at the north and south end. One of the reasons that the mall had financial problems in the 1950s was that it could not find a suitable tenant to build a north anchor. And this was probably a lesson for designers of suburban shopping centers. One of the problems back then was that this north side faced Route 30, which was more of a country road back then. Today it is covered with its own malls and commercial establishments, but back in the 50s there was not a lot of traffic on there, so there was not a lot of interest by any of the big stores to build a store that would simply look onto Route 30. So for about 10 years or so, this north end of the mall was an open area. It was one of those two open landscaped accesses that I mentioned before. The first one being between the Dome and the Kennedy store. This was a wider access because it was the whole north end of the mall being open, and it was simply a grassy slope coming out from the lower level of the mall up into the parking lot. To make it more interesting, they did have for many years some kiddie rides at that north end. So if you were looking down here back in the early 50s, you would see small carousel and other little rides that for children. The idea being that this would be a way for the children to be preoccupied while the parents were doing all the shopping. The area in here, I believe there was more landscaping and grass than we see here today. It's hard to visualize it, but in here someplace, right about in here, the 10th anniversary of Shoppers World, before this construction was started, they had a model house. And that, I think, was part of a big giveaway for the 10th anniversary, and of course that was in 1961, and we do have photographs of that. But this enclosed mall was very much the way of all suburban malls, and Shoppers World did pick that up in the early 60s. Another advantage of the enclosure is to protect against floods. And we do have several pictures that show in 1954, one of the big hurricanes, because of the open north end of the mall, a great deal of water came in and about half of the lower level was flooded out. And that's something that has been avoided since the entire mall was enclosed. Now we're going to try to get a little closer look at the east side where the new construction has started. The important feature over there being, of course, the Framingham Cinema. We're now on the east side of the original Shoppers World, very tightly squeezed between the old and the new. Construction has already begun on this side. We're looking at the current main entrance of the Framingham Cinema, which is now a 6-screen complex. It started as a 1-screen complex back in 1951, so it was the Framingham Cinema, singular at that time. What you're seeing today is not at all part of, what you're seeing here is not at all part of that original cinema. The main theater was split in two, and 4 other theaters were added starting in the 60s to come up to today's 6 theaters. The idea, of course, was that access to the theater would be from the mall, so that it would be something that shoppers would be attracted to as opposed to an outside entrance. So what we'll do now is take a look at the original entrance to the Framingham Cinema. This is the west side of the cinema complex, and it is on this side that the original entrance was located. And it is this building, this large white building, that was the original cinema, and the letters spelling out the name CINEMA, about 10-foot letters, was one of the first introductions of that word in America for movie house. It just, in 1951, that was just a word mainly used for art houses associated more with foreign films. But the General Cinema Corporation is what introduced that term, and as far as I know, the this theater, this large original Shoppers World cinema, was the original General Cinema Corporation theater and was their flagship theater for many years. It might be also interesting to note in the original architect's drawings for this, the word wasn't quite cinema, it was cinemat, M-A-T, at the end, sort of like automat. but they settled on cinema, and that's what we see today. So this landmark sign unfortunately will not survive, but we are glad to be able to capture it at this time to show just how imposing it is. The entrance area here is not actually part of the original, the lighted overhang with the poles and the glass partitions. That all came along when the other theaters began to be built in the 1960s. It's hard to visualize, but the entrance was actually deep within those doors. You would come out right through this area. We're right now in the northeast access area for the mall, and the idea was that you could go right from here into the theater after a hard day's shopping. One other thing I'd like to point out, and I don't know if how easily it can be seen, but you'll notice a little aluminum door to the right of the entrance, and in front of it is a red-colored patch of concrete that stands out from the surrounding black. Now, when I was first here in the mid-60s, I seem to recall that that area was enclosed with a concrete screen, and that it was set aside for smoking purposes, so that if you came here at that time, you might look through that screen and see it just full with tobacco smoke, and young people taking a cigarette break so that in the middle of their movie they didn't have to leave the theater. That's I understand what that was. So this is our 6 cinemas today. They are going to be replaced by a completely standalone facility between Shoppers World and Natick Mall, which will have much more than the 6 that we have here. It will be a 14-screen theater and with its own parking lot. So the concept of shopping and going to a movie to get off your feet will be interrupted, at least to the extent that you'll have to get in your car, you have to get into some kind of transportation to see your movie. Now let's go actually into the mall and take a look around. We're now in the interior courtyard, the famous mall of the original Shoppers World. We're looking south to in the direction of Route 9. You can see the paint fading on the surface of the famous Jordan Marsh Dome. In the center of the courtyard is the large wooden soldier statue that is a very unusual thing to see here in August, because it's part of the traditional Christmas decoration at Shoppers World. We're pleased to know that many of those wooden soldiers have been sold or given to other organizations so that they will continue a useful life. The mall is 675 feet long, 100 feet wide. The landscape design of the bushes, the walkways, the lawns goes back. It's pretty much according to the original design. We're standing at the walkway in front of the Jordan Marsh basement store, which I mentioned earlier was a later addition. You see in the foreground a white walkway going straight across. There was a third bridge connecting the upper level over that walkway before the anchor store here was built to the north. Once the store was built here, that was sort of a redundant bridge, and when it became necessary to repair it, they decided just to take it down, because this rampway we're filming from, in effect, replaced it. When the mall opened in 1951, there were 44 stores, and as you can see, there are many stores. Their names are still seen today. In the distance to the right of the dome, the white building again was that Kennedy store, which was a special landmark, and as a matter of fact, you can actually see the faded remnant of the name Kennedy there on the edge. We had 44 stores. We had the theater at the time, the cinema. It was a single cinema seating 1,500 people. And we had the parking with the 6,000 cars. It was quite a place and quite a big event when it was opened on October 4th, 1951. This bridge that's missing, I should also point out, there was a small theater marquee affixed to the south side of that, so that this gets back to the connection between the mall shops and the theater. As you were shopping around the mall, you could look at the marquee on the bridge and see what was playing at the theater. When the theater became 6 theaters instead of 1, of course, it was much more difficult to maintain, and so that service disappeared when the bridge disappeared. You'll see down on the mall one of the later additions, and I'm not sure you can see it from here. Well, I want to talk about the Main Street clock. But before I do that, let me just mention this wooden structure right close up to us, this cupola and this shingle roof. This, of course, is the little dwelling in which children would meet the Easter Bunny or meet Santa Claus. It was part of the social amenity that Sharpers World provided. And in that area in front of it, various times of the year, there would be band concerts and there would be pens for live animal displays. The kinds of things you just can't do in an enclosed mall, and the kinds of things that made Sharpers World very special. We're now at the lower level of Sharpers World on the east side. This gives you an idea of what the walkways and shopping was like at that time, and some idea of maybe what the disadvantage was, because as you can see on the left side, this is all open to the elements. So in the winter, the overhanging walkways did not provide a great deal of shelter. As a matter of fact, at one time during the 50s, this whole open side of the walkways was enclosed with storm windows in order to make the shopping a little more comfortable, but it just didn't work out. So the appeal of Sharpers World has always been as a springtime and summertime place, and as you can see by the lovely landscaping that's still visible here today, this is a very nice place to come and sit and enjoy, as well as to shop. So Sharpers World has been here for 43 years now. It was the beginning of a very important movement in American society and culture and commerce. It signaled the beginning of the great migration from the cities to the suburbs that America went through in the 1940s and 1950s. But it's now the 1990s, and trends have changed and tastes have changed, and so must Sharpers World. We've been very fortunate to have it with us for 43 years, to be a part of our lives, and it's something that those who have lived here and who have enjoyed it will not forget. Fortunately, we are going to keep the memory of it alive through things such as this film, through existing film and photographs, and through the memories of the people of Framingham and the people of New England. Thank you.